Can you hear me?
I can
Yes.
hear you. You're fairly quiet.
You're fairly quiet, Babassi. Now let me announce the beginning of the show. My goodness gracious me, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, assembled company. Welcome to the World Storytelling Cabin. Tonight it is coming from multivarious directions. I think probably we're linked up somewhere along the line to Burning Man or their online version, which is Sparkleverse. I'm sitting here in Maui Wowie Festival in Norfolk, and Mike Rust, who I'm going to hand over to any second to keep good order and manage us and keep some kind of order to all the proceedings. Is sitting down near the Welsh border somewhere, and the rest. I mean, I know Babassi's in Washington D.C., and so we're circumnavigating the globe today. So, Mike, it's over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. A smallish but select group. So, John, how long are you here for? Are you just listening, or are you going to tell a story? You've muted yourself now. You muted yourself.
Oops.
Yeah, no, I could tell a story later if I won't get one in my head, and because we're a bit short tonight, so I really ought to be responsible.
You being responsible. Now, when's that going to happen?
Well, it's always been an ambition.
Right. Well, we're going to start off with Kath, and then we're going to come to Keith Butler's. Third is going to be me. Okay, and then we'll make it up as we normally do. We'll just make it up as we go along. But the list then goes in front of me is Diana, then Baba. So we'll see. Now then, Susan's here, and she's from South Africa, because last time we met last week, I thought she was from Texas, and I got it wrong. So I know you're from South Africa now. Okay? Right. So we're going to ask Kath to go first. So if everybody would like to... Oh, Heather's coming. Hello, Heather. Yeah, she's from... I know where you're from. You're from Scotland. Right. Okay, so everybody's going to mute themselves, and Kath's going to go first, and I'm going to sit there until everybody has done what they want to do, and then we'll go. And we've got a Kevin Cow coming. We're just about to start, Kevin. So my friend Kath is just about to tell a story. If you can mute yourself. Okay, here we go.
All right, shall I start then, Mike? Well, hello, everybody. Hello, Janet, just come in. Hiya.
Hello, Kath. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I normally tell very old traditional stories, but this one's only happened about 60 years ago. It was in Sicily, and there was a fisherman sitting on the harbour wall, as he did almost every evening at the end of his working day. Sometimes he'd sit and he'd mend his nets for a little while, just as the sun went down, watching the waves lap on the shore. It was a very peaceful time of day, because he knew when he went up to his house, well, with his children and his grandchildren and his wife Louisa and friends dropping in like they always did, it was usually a busy, rumbustious sort of evening. It was just nice to have this little bit of peace and tranquility before he went home. This particular evening, he was sitting, watching the waves on the shore, watching the sun sink into the ocean, and he looked up, and there was a man. And he was a big man, where Pietro, our fisherman, where Pietro was spare and wiry and muscular from all the work that he'd done over a lifetime. This man, he was big, but he was fleshy rather than strong. And he had a camel-coloured cashmere coat draped over his shoulders. He wore a very expensive-looking suit, his shoes, hand-stitched. And as Pietro peered up at him against the brightness of the sky, he said, "Mario? Is it you? Mario, after 50 years? Where have you been? What have you been doing? Sit down, old friend. Tell me what sort of life you've had." And Mario took a silk handkerchief from his pocket and he flicked it open, and then he spread the handkerchief out on the harbour wall so he would not spoil his fine clothes when he sat down. And Pietro said, "What were you? I think you were 15 when you left, and you know, we heard a few things, a few rumours about you, a few stories got back to us, but Mario, we never heard from you. What have you been doing for 50 years? Mario said, "Well, you know, I always had a hankering for the bright lights. I went to the town. And there, in the town, I met people. And I did a favour for this person, and I did a favour for that person, and then they did a favour for me, and before I knew it, I was in with some very influential people. And I began to rise through the ranks of what we call the family. You could say I became connected. You know, Pietro, it's very important for a man to be connected." And Pietro thought, well, his house was only 100 yards up that way. Sometimes it took him 20 minutes to get home, because there'd be a couple perhaps sitting on kitchen chairs in front of their house and they'd call him over for a bit of a chat, and then there'd be some children playing their last game before they had to go to bed, and they'd want him to throw the ball for them, and perhaps there'd be a neighbour who'd been ill and he'd just call in to see how they were, and then when he got home there'd be the smell of Louisa's cooking, and there'd always be at least 2 grandchildren tumbling out of the door to greet him. So yeah, he had to agree it's important for a man to be connected. And Mario went on. He said, "And as I rose through the ranks of the family, I began to hold right here, the life and death of other men." That's a great thing, you know, Pietro. And Pietro looked at the little fishing boats just bobbing gently in the harbour. The sea was calm now, and he thought of the times when several fishing boats might set out and they'd be far out on the open sea, and the sea would have been calm when they set out, but then there'd be a sudden storm, and how desperately one crew might fight to save the lives of another. He thought of the time that Mario's father had been one of those men who they'd tried to save and they couldn't. That was just before Mario left, he remembered. And he turned to Mario and he said, "Yeah, you're right, Mario. Life and death, very important thing." And then Mario said, "Well, of course, with all this power and influence and with all my connections, I mean, as you can see, just to look at me, I've grown to be a very, very rich man. And that, let me tell you, Pietro, that's important. Because now I am so rich I can afford to retire. I can afford to return here to this peaceful place, and I now have the leisure to sit on the harbour wall and watch the sun set and watch the waves lapping on the shore. And Pietro was kind enough not to make the obvious comment, but he said, "You know, Mario, we never know who's going to drop in. Children, grandchildren, friends. Louisa always makes plenty of food in the evening. Why don't you come home with me?" And Mario said, "Oh yes, please, Pietro. I would like that. Thank you."
Thanks, Kath. That was
Thank you.
well told and a lovely story. Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm going to go to Keith next because I said a word. Then after Keith, John, I'm going to come to you. So that will give you a chance if you need to go away. So we're going to go Keith Butlers, then John, and after John, we're going to Diana. Okay?
Hello, everybody. Yesterday, they were harvesting in our next door field, and they had a combine harvester, which was about 4 times as big as the combine that we used to use many years ago. And so it was a massive machine. But years and years ago, they used to harvest the corn using a scythe. And so they would cut the corn down and then bind it all up together and stack it up to be threshed later on. But this is a story from those times when they harvested using a scythe. There was a farmer and he had a couple of fields and he harvested it well. He looked after the field and he was a good farmer. And he and his wife had 3 boys and another one on the way. And he said to his wife, "Well, we're getting to the point where we need more income. We haven't got enough fields really to sustain us. Okay, we've got the wheat and the barley that we can use and we can sell the surplus, but we need more." And he said that I've seen down next door the beck, next to our fields, down to the beck, there's a field which is all scrubland. It's all full of weeds and it's all boggy and that. And I thought that the farmer there, you know, just doesn't look after his field. He doesn't use it at all. And he heard that that field was coming up for sale. And the farmer went down to the auction and he put in a very, very low bid for the field. And it was banged down to him that the farmer in the green jacket, it's your field. And so he's so pleased, and he went back to his wife and he told his wife that now they were able to have another field and it would help to supply them with all the food and the income they needed. And so that back end, that autumn, he set to and he cleared out all the rubbish and all the weeds and he dug trenches down to drain the field. And so it was in then good condition, ready to work the land, ready for the spring. And he stood there with his leaning on his spade, and he realized that he wasn't alone. Because he looked down and he saw that there's this creature about 4 feet high. And as it stood there, it's kind of a shape of a turnip, all covered with hair and a black jerkin. And below the body was these bow legs, all hairy and brown, and arms that hung down to his knees, and its face looked like a potato with 2 black eyes, and on its head there was kind of a hair which looked like white straw. And the farmer realized that this was a boggart. "What are you doing here?" said the boggart. And the farmer said, "Well, this is my field." I said, "Yes, but you cleaned up this field. I like it all wet and muddy and lots of weeds and everything. You've ruined it." "But it's my field," said the farmer. No, no, I've been here for 1,000 years, said the boggart. No. Look, we'll have to take it to the court and let the judge decide whose field this belongs to. Oh, no, 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 said the boggart. No, no, because the boggart can neither read nor write, and do anything to do with judges and courts. And the boggart said, this is what we'll do. You have half the crop next year, and I'll have the other half. And the farmer said, well, yeah, well, okay, we'll do that. Which side would you like? Which half would you like? That what grows above the ground, or that which grows below the ground? And the boggart said, well, I'll have what grows above the ground. Done, said the farmer. And so the boggart went off. And it went off that night, scaring people, what he normally does, scratching on their doors and shaking their windows and frightening people. And the farmer, he went back and he told his wife what, and she said, what are you going to plant? He said, I'm going to plant some tatties, some potatoes. And the boggart's welcome to the tatty tops. And so he worked the land that back end, and he planted the tatties in the spring, and he had a good crop of potatoes. They dug them all up and put them in the cart, ready to lead away. And the boggart turned up. I've come for my half of the crop, said. The farmer said, well, you're welcome to all the tatty arms. Oh, no, 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 said the boggart. And he said, oh, I said, no, next year, I'll have what is below the ground, and you could have what's above the ground. Done, said the farmer. And the boggart went off into the night, scaring people what it is at night. And that back end, the farmer, he worked the land, and in the spring, he sowed wheat. Come harvest time, the farmer there, he used his scythe to harvest all the wheat, and he had all that was above the ground, all the wheat grains. And the boggart came along and said, I want half of my crop. And he said, well, you're welcome to all the roots that are under the stubble there. Oh, no, 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 said the boggart. Oh, I've been tricked again. Oh, no. Next year, you grow wheat. And we'll start on each of the side of the field with our scythes, and we'll harvest it from each side of the field. And then who gets the most and gets the harvest. And the farmer said, well, which side of the field would you like? He said, the boggart said, well, I'll have the part that's just near the beck there, down below there, down a bit lower down. The farmer agreed. But the farmer wasn't sure what to do, and so he went off into the village, and he asked the wise man what he should do. And the wise man was very impressed that the farmer had tricked this boggart twice. This supernatural being had tricked him twice. And the wise man said, go to the blacksmith and buy 20 or 30 iron stakes, about a foot long and about maybe half an inch in diameter. And just before harvest, go into the fields and into the boggart side of the field and just hammer those stakes in to the hidden in the wheat. And the farmer did so. He planted the crop as he sowed the crop as he did in the springtime, and it came to harvest time. And the day before they were due to the harvest, he went off with his iron stakes and a hammer, and he hammered them into the boggart side of the field. And the next day they were to harvest. And the boggart turned up with his long, sharp scythe and his very strong arms, although they were short, they were very strong, and he'd got a strong body. And the farmer was there with his scythe. And they started to scythe down the wheat on each side of the field. And the farmer was doing well, scything down the wheat, and then his wife was able to gather all the stalks up into sheaves, and they'd stack it up. And on the other side of the field, there was the boggart, swinging his scythe and hitting all his iron stakes. He didn't realise what had happened, and all his scythe was getting so blunt. He said, oh, this farming lark, it's so difficult. I didn't realise it's so difficult to harvest. And he swung his scythe until it was just so blunt he couldn't do anything with it, and he threw it down I've had enough of this farming lark. And he went off into the distance, and then eventually at night, scaring people, doing what he did best. And so the farmer was left with all the crop in his field. He was able to have a good harvest of wheat that year, and he never saw the boggart ever again.
Lovely, thank you, Keith. That's beautiful. Right, as we said, we're going to go to John because John is sat in a little van in the middle of a field somewhere in Norfolk, and he's been working all day, so he may need to slip off and have a cup of tea somewhere or something. So we're going to let him get on now, and I'm sure Ali and I can cope with it, John, if you need to get away afterwards.
Yeah, I think I can survive, but caffeine might be essential. But for the moment, the story, I think, was I'm sitting in East Anglia. I'll do an East Anglian story. And it was, it's a well-known one, but it was collected in about 1847 or something, around that time, from Mrs. Walters. And it was first published in the Ipswich Journal of that period. And it's Cap o' Rushes. And it's a bit of a King Lear story. And it's an I Love You More Than Salt story. And it's way back in time when my hair was dark and my beard was ginger and all my teeth were my own. And there was a rich man and he had 3 daughters. And he turned away, mothers don't need to be continually reminded about how wonderful they are. Mothers know they're wonderful. But us dads, we like to be told, you're fantastic. And he called all his daughters to him and he said to the first, he said, how much do you love me? She said, Daddy, dear, I love you more than all the gold and all the silver and all of the world. He said, so it's feeling good. It's feeling good. And he calls his second daughter. He said, daughter, dear, how much do you love me? He said, Daddy, dear, I love you more than life itself. Oh, amazing. So he's feeling good. He's got all his daddy stuff going. And he turns around to his youngest, and if truth be known, his favourite, said, daughter dear, how much do you love me? And she thought long and she thought hard. And after much thought and much consideration, she said, Daddy dear, I love you more than fresh meat loves salt. What? Even the poorest peasant has salt. Get out, you don't love me at all. Run upstairs, get some dresses from your dead mother's chest, and then never darken my doorstep again. When she went upstairs, she got a dress of silk, dress of the colour of the birds of the sky, dress of silver, dress of gold, and she wrapped them up, stick them in a little bundle under her arm. And she went walking. And in those days, as you know, the paths were overgrown, and she got a bit tattered and torn, and she walked all day until she came to a stream. And on the other side of the stream was a huge house, big mansion. So she went out in the stream, she cut rushes and she made a cloak with a big hood that came over her head. And she took a beautiful clothes and she put them in a hole in the hollow tree next to the stream. She walked up to the big house. She knocked on the front door. And it was opened by a kindly man, the master, and he was quite good looking as well. And he said, yes, sir, can I help you? She said, I really want a job. I'm really in need. He said, well, go. He was a kind man. He said, well, go around the back. Tell the servants I sent you. And tell them they're to give you work. And she went around the back, and it was one of those happy households. So they took her in, warmed her by the fire. And then they gave her a little work, light work at first. But she never complained about anything, but she didn't talk much. She didn't talk at all. Just had the hood pulled down and everyone called her Cap o' Rushes. Well, life carried on like this. She was happy enough, but news came of her dance. It was the last 3 nights. And it was happening in a big house. And the master said, the servant sent us a Cap o' Rushes, said, look, after we've done our work, We take a little wine and we take a little cheese from the master cellar. He knows we do it, doesn't mind. We go up to the gallery and we see all the fine lords and ladies come in to the ballroom, and we have a little party ourselves. Please join us. And she said, I think I will. But come that night, when it was time to go to sleep, I'm far too tired. And she just lay down on the bench and pretended to be asleep. As soon as the servants were at the door, she's across the street. She's got a dress of silk, the colour of the birds of the sky. She does her hair nicely, looking in the stream, using the stream as a mirror. She walks up, she knocks on the front door of the mansion. She's showing down to the ballroom. All eyes are upon her, especially the master's. And he hardly danced with anyone else all night. When it was the end of the dance, she slipped off. She put on her rags again. She came and she lay down on the bench. Caporushes should have seen that the most beautiful girl you've ever seen in all of your life appeared tonight. And the dancer, the master could hardly take his eyes off him. You know, I think she may be the one. Terribly interesting. Maybe she'll come tomorrow. I'll have a look there. Second night came, exactly the same thing. I'm far too tired. As soon as the servant's up the door, she's across the stream. This time she's got on a dress of silver. She's looking good. She comes into the dance. The master is waiting at the bottom of the stairs for her. They dance all night. His eyes never leave hers. Her eyes never leave his. When it's time to go, she slips on, puts on a cape again, and lays down the bench. Caporushes, you should have seen it. She was there again. The master, he was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. His eyes never left hers, her eyes never left his. They danced together all night. We think he's falling in love. Beautiful, beautiful. I wish I'd seen it. Tomorrow night's your last chance. Your last chance. Now just wait. Well, just make sure you come. All right, I will, said Caporushes. But of course, when night came, I'm far too tired. This time, as soon as the servants were out the door, she's there. She's rushing across the stream. She's got a dress of gold on. She's could everyone mute? It's sort of, I've got rustling of leaves around me and I can't hear myself sing. My goodness gracious me. Marvelous. Thank you. So anyway, she's there, you know, and this is a beautiful part. She comes, she's got a dress of gold. The master is waiting at the top of the stairs. They come down together, hand in hand. They dance all night, eyes never leaving each other. At the end of the night, he takes a ring off his finger. He gives it to her, a gold ring. She takes one of her golden hairs, ties a knot in it, makes a little necklace, puts it through the ring, hangs it round her neck. Then she's off. Changes. Servants come back. Caporushes. They were there tonight. Oh, God, you should have seen it. They danced together all night. At the end of the dance, the master gave a ring. She put it around her neck. Oh, we know he's in love. Oh, I wish I'd met her. Well, the master, of course, sent everyone else looking for the girl, and they couldn't find her. And you know what men are like. Cass will tell you, you know, if they don't get what they want, you know, they pout a bit, don't they? And then you've met them, haven't they? And then he took himself to bed and he refused to eat. He refused to, oh no. He got thinner and thinner and said, well, they like their master. They didn't want him to sort of just fade away. So the cook, who's a big man, big black beard, big red face, big pot belly, says, Caporushes, I'm making some soup. Could you just stir it? When it's ready, could you put it in a bowl and get it ready for the master? So she said, and as she puts it in the bowl, she drops the gold ring in. And one of the other servants takes the bowl up to the master, and you know it's like when you're ill, people give you. Why do I give you soup? I mean, you want chocolate eclairs and stuff like that, don't you? But so but you play. When parents say, "Don't play with your food," because you're pushing it around in plates. So, but you can't push soup around. It's not, it flops back in the middle and pushing the soup around. Click, takes out the goal. Who made this soup? The cook's is sent up, big black beard, big red face, big bot belly. He said it wasn't you. Someone must have helped you. It's just a little servant girl, cup of rushes. Be kind to her. Send her to me. As she walks in, he holds up the ring. He said, "Where did you get this?" "From him who gave it to me," she said, throwing off her cloak. And there she stood, the girl he'd been dancing with 3 nights. Well, we know there's going to be a wedding. And she just had one request, that the meat should be served without salt. And all the rich people of the land, or that area, were in there. At the wedding at the end was a little old man just sitting at the end of a table. And the meat is served. And the master cuts his, and everyone else cuts theirs. And they put the piece of meat at the end of the knife. No forks in those days. Everyone put the meat in there. They spat it on the floor. And at the end of one of the tables, there's an old man crying. When he's asked his business, asked why he's crying, he said, "Well, years ago, I asked my daughters how much they loved me. One said she loved me more than all the gold and all the silver and all the world. I thought it was fantastic. Then second said she loved me more than life itself. I thought that was even better. But the youngest, if truth be known, told me she loved me more than fresh meat loves salt. And I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she didn't love me at all, and I sent her away, and I have no means of knowing whether she's alive or dead." And with that, Cup of Rushes threw back her bridal veil and ran down and threw her arms around her father. And there was a great family reunion. And there was masses of meat, this time served with salt. And there was a bit of vegetarian stuff for the vegetarians. And there was masses to eat, masses to drink. And of course, had you been there, each and every one of you would have been invited. Well, then the story ends.
Thank you very much, John. Exemplary as always. And I know you've had a really long day, and I know you've been working very hard. So sit there. You're very welcome. Of course you are. But if you want to slip away and have a cup of tea somewhere, I completely understand. Or, of course, you could go for a snooze.
Are you suggesting that
getting up a bit in life, like, Anyway, I did say we'll go to Diana next, then we go from Diana to Babby, then I'll probably stick one in about then, and we'll see where we go from there. So we're going to go to Diana first, who's going to tell me she comes from
Aberdeen in Scotland.
The Highlands. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I knew that all along. Okay. I know that all along because Stanley Robinson always started his stories off by saying all the women from the Highlands are absolutely beautiful and good looking. And I can see 2 of them in front of me.
Right. I've got a little story for you today. So this story was set quite a very long time ago. And it had been a very long and hard day with lots of shouting and shrieking and wielding of swords and blood spilling. And the cause and the cost, did they ever match up? Well, there were 2 men left on the battlefield, the 2 warrior chiefs. And they were checking all the bodies just to make sure that no one was still alive and had been overlooked. It was a sad task. And eventually they met in the middle of the field. Well, they were still actually at war. Were they going to fight each other? But they were both so tired. There are bloodstains all over their swords, and they themselves were covered in muck. And they were so fatigued, so desperately tired, so aware that so many of their own had died. And there wasn't anyone at all on the entire battlefield, which stretched a great distance, that they could find was still alive. So what would be done? They had their swords, they had their shields. Would they just fight it out there and then? But they were both exhausted and they decided to lay down their weapons. So between them both, they put the swords, they put the shields, they put the helmets, and they both lay down. But they were so tired, they couldn't get to sleep. It seemed to take forever, and all that was replaying in their minds was the horror of the day, and the day before that, and the day before that. And eventually, one chief said to the other, "At home I have a son, and he has a wooden sword, and he likes to use it playing with his friends. For like our mother each day. And I sincerely hope for both of them that they have the freedom. They have the freedom in the days to come to be what they want to be. Because those two warrior chiefs, they'd been forced into it. They hadn't really had any option. And now they were weighing up the cause. And now they were weighing up the cost. And it didn't add up. And it never would. Well, they chatted a bit more. And one chief told the other about his wife and how she loved to cook and what wonderful meals she would cook, using all the vegetables round about and the meat as well. And the other chief would say, well, his wife, she liked to cook too, but what she loved most of all was looking after the animals and how many horses they had, and all the young animals that the children liked to look after, like the rabbits and the chickens. And of course, the chickens provided food. They provided eggs. And there was lots of vegetables grown as well. And so it went on. One told the other a story about his village and his home life. And the other chief responded in kind and said about his life. And so it went on. And in the morning, they got up. They picked up their sword. They picked up their helmets. They picked up their shields. They stood there. They looked each other in the eye and they both turned and went in separate directions. And they say it's because once you know someone's story, once you know about them, about their family, where they grew up and how they got to the place in life that they are at now, that you can't hate them. That's what they say. And that's what I hope is true.
Thanks ever so much, Dinah. That's a lovely story. Thank you.
Yeah, that was
Right.
Keating, I think. And Liz Weir told me about it anyway.
Well, I think I've heard some American storytellers tell it. Certainly heard Dan Kedding tell it, but that's not, I've never heard your version.
Okay.
That's the most important thing. I've never heard your version. Okay. So I'm going to do one, then after me, it's going to be Baba. And after Baba, we'll go to Heather. Now, I'm going to tell this story because watching all my news today and this week and everything else, the first couple of lines have been absolutely resonating with me. And this story is something like 800 or 900 years old because it starts like this. When Sir Jasper came back from the Crusades, he stood up in the middle of Somerset and he spoke these immortal words. How the hell do you convert someone to your religion? By killing them. And there was a quiet, and all these people looked at him, and he sold all his lands, and he gave all the rest of it to his oldest son, and he went to be a monk. And he went to be a monk in a place called Grenoble, down in the south of France, and with him he took his youngest son. And his son was only 16 years old, and his name was Hugh. And there little Hugh stayed, and there was a sadness because his father died, was in the monastery. And then by the time he was 22, 23, he was ordained as a monk, and he lived happily in his little cell there, and the whole world was on the outside, but he lived his life. And in those days in our land, in my land, in England, there was a king, and his king was called Henry. He was one of the Henrys. And he was driving down through Somerset one day, and he came across an abbot down there and a monastery and the priory, and it was one of those where there were male monks and there were female monks and there were female nuns and all sorts of, but the whole thing was all mixed up. The nuns were in with the monks were just getting drunk. No one was doing all the work they were supposed to do, like cutting up all the wood for the old ladies and the widow women. No one had a hospital or anything else. The whole place was a shambles. And the king, he sat down and said, this is no good. So he sacked the abbot. He said, we'll start off by sacking the abbot. What are we going to do next? And they said, we need a new abbot. And they started talking about it because he had a meeting there and then. He was that kind of king. And they said, what about Sir Jasper? You know, the one who came back from the Crusades and said all that about killing the other. And they said, yeah, but he's died. And what about his son, Hugh? Took his son Hugh with him. Hugh would be in his early 20s now. He'd be a good abbot. Jolly good idea, said the king. Go and get him and get him back. Tell him he's now the abbot of Glastonbury. Well, these 2 nights, they went all the way to Gounod. They found Hugh in his little cell. They said, we got some good news for you. Your king says you're going to be the abbot of Glastonbury. And Hugh said, well, I don't want to do that. It's the last thing I want to do. Go and be an abbot and it'd be important. I'm happy sat here in my little cell with my Bible and my water and my bit of bread. And the knight said, no, look, he's a Plantagenet king. He gets very cross if he doesn't get his own way. You'll have to come. I'm not going anywhere. He slammed the door in their faces and went back to his little cell. But in the night time, the light of Christianity came into his heart. And there was just a little candle, and it seemed as if the candle was speaking to him. And the candle said this, wasn't the king asking you? It was me. I need some help in Glastonbury. You have to be working for me. Oh, said Hugh, didn't realise it was you, Lord. And the next morning, 6 o'clock, he's got his bag over his shoulder, he's marching off down the road. Oh, you two, you're supposed to be following me. And off he goes to Glastonbury. Well, he sorts the place out in the first 3 weeks, doesn't he? He makes all the nuns sleeping where the nuns are supposed to be sleeping. All the monks are supposed to be sleeping where the monks are sleeping. They all go around cutting the wood for the widow woman. They've got a hospital going and the whole place is going well. And the king turns up. And he's really pleased with himself. He goes, he says, making proper decisions is a thing kings can do. It's getting square pins in square holes and round pins in round holes. Well done, Hugh. You're doing a good job for your king. Well, Hugh turned round and he gave him a fire and damnation sermon there and then. I don't work for you. I work for his Lord. And what were you doing last night and how much did you have to drink? And you're supposed to be the moral leader as well as the military and a secular thing. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the king was standing there and he was stamping his foot. And he said, quiet, Hugh. If you say another word, I'm going to take you to the Tower of London. And I'm going to put you in the Tower of London for a month and you're going to be on water and bread and that's it. Now be quiet. And Hugh went, a holiday. Absolutely love to go. Not a problem at all. Where's my Bible? I'm off to the Tower of London. By the way, and he gave him another burst of 10 minutes. Well, the king, he didn't like it at all. He went back to London. He does what every king does in every story I've ever heard of. In the whole of the United Kingdom and the British Isles and Ireland, he shouted at his queen. He started shouting at her. He shouted at all the princesses. He kicked the dog. He walked round the crown one way. He walked round the crown the other way. He didn't know what to do. He said, I've got it. Got to go and visit Cornwall. Jumped on his horse, went straight away back to Glastonbury. Stopped there. Said, Hugh, he said, I've got something to tell you. What's that, said Hugh? He said, I'm going to promote you. So what do you mean you're going to promote me? I don't want to be promoted. No, said the king. I'm pretty certain you didn't want to be promoted the Bishop of Lincoln. And Hugh went, I don't want to be the Bishop of Lincoln. And the king says, you're promoted. You're going to be the bishop. Off to Lincoln with you. And Hugh had to go. He didn't know. He had 2 big soldiers walking on either side, and they marched him all the way to Lincoln. And just as he was coming into Lincoln, it was now the middle of the winter, he sat down in the big square, and he got the sheriff, and he said, Sheriff, he said, I've got a question to ask you. He goes, what's that? He says, what's all that crying going on? And the sheriff said, well, times are hard here, my bishop, the Right Reverend. These are the Fens, and we're having a really bad winter. And we've just had to tell all the children that they were fed yesterday and they're not going to get fed till tomorrow. We have no food for the children and we have no food for the people. It's hard times here. But we have just enough so we can have the royal feast, the bishop's feast for you. Because every time we concentrate a new bishop here in the Diocese of Lincolnshire, the king has ordained that you have to have a grand meal. So we've got all the food here for you, as long as there's not many of you. And you said, well, there's only me. He said, bring out all the food. So they brought out all the food to the square and they had one great big stag. And they put this stag there, and you can imagine these great big things when they turn a handle, there's a big fire going and there's all the juice and the dripping coming out of it, and the smell was fantastic. Where all the people of the town, they sat there looking at this, and they looked at you, and they looked at the sheriff, gathering all the food that was in the town. He was going to feed him, and he was going to feed his soldiers, and they were going to feed the rich. And they wondered what kind of bishop they were getting. Well, when it was all ready, just as the sun was going down, Hugh said to the sheriff, bring me my meal. And it was a lovely meal. It had slices of deer, it had slices of lamb, it had slices of beef, and it had all the vegetables and Yorkshire puddings and everything else, and gravy all over it. And Hugh, he picked up his knife and he signalled to a little boy in the crowd. He said, you come here. And the little boy was 9 years old. And he came and stood in front of Hugh and he said, would you care to share my meal with me? And he cut a piece of meat and he gave it to him. And the little boy, he picked up his own knife and he went to cut it again in half. And Hugh said to the little boy, he said, why are you cutting that meat in half? He said, I'm going to cut it into 4. It's a bit for me, a bit for my sister, a bit for my cousin, and my mum hasn't eaten for days. And Hugh looked at the sheriff and he looked at the little boy and he said, invite all your family to my meal. And the sheriff looked into the bishop's eyes and the bishop looked right back and a friendship was made. And the sheriff, he went out to all the royal forests and he took all his men with him, and these were the gamekeepers. These weren't the poachers, John. These were the gamekeepers. They knew what they were doing and they cleared all the forest. And they brought everything that was alive and they brought it all into the town, and they stayed there for 3 days. And everything was cooked and everything was put to one side, and what they couldn't eat, they put to one side so they would have enough to see them through the bad months till the spring came. And just that morning, Hugh stood up himself and he picked up a glass of water and he took a sip and he took a bit of bread and he broke it in half. And he went to eat it, and the sheriff came over and he said, today you can eat the bread, but you're going to drink like a king. And he went to the private store where the king kept his own claret, the best red wine that came from France. And he brought a jug and he put it into Hugh's glass and said, drink like a king. And then the people knew what kind of bishop they had. Well, it was then that Hugh went into his cathedral. It was the first time, and the imps were flying around, and there was an imp that came in and he said, you're an impetuous imp. And he clicked his fingers and he turned him to stone, and that imp is still there to this day. And he set about his work. About how to be a bishop in the medieval times when the king turned up. Well, the king turned up and he saw the sheriff and he said, well, how are you getting on with the new bishop? He said, oh, he's got to find you. Oh, it's one of the things I do best, the king, is putting square pins in square holes and putting round pins in round holes and getting the right people in the right place to do the right things. Aren't I a fine king? I think I'll have a day off. I think I'll go hunting. And the sheriff said, you can go hunting as much as you like, but you won't find anything around here. And the king said, why not? Said, royal forest. And the sheriff told the king what had happened. Well, he went bright red in the face. He started jumping around. He shouted at the queen. He kicked the dog. He shouted at the princesses. He started going round the throne one way and round the boat the other way, everything else. He said, you get that Hugh in front of me tomorrow morning in the middle of the forest. I'll tell him what I think of him. So the next morning, the king was sat on a tree stump, and there was 25 knights on one side and there was 25 knights on the other, and there was an alley in between them. And as Hugh was made to walk down the alley, they turned his back on him. They turned his back on him 25 times. And in the end, Hugh stood in front of the king. And Hugh took one look at the king and went, "And what were you doing last night? And how much did you have to drink? You're supposed to be the secular, the most important person in the kingdom. You're supposed to look after your people, and all you're doing is hunting and drinking, and you've got strange women in your bed." And he went on for about 20 minutes, and then the king just said, "Be quiet, Hugh." And he picked up out of his bag a plaque about that big, and he threw it at Hugh and said, "The next meeting's at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. Don't be late, Privy Councillor." And Hugh went, "Privy Councillor? I don't want to be a Privy Councillor." "I know," said the king. "We've done that 3 times. If you're going to I'll put you in a cell in the Tower of London with some. Just don't be late. Because the one thing I need from my Privy Councillors is for people to tell me what they think, and not for people to tell me what they think I want to hear. You just go and do it. And don't be late," he said, muttering to himself. "I hate people being late at the Privy Council." Well, Hugh didn't have any choice. He was about 25, 26. He was now Bishop of Lincoln, and he was in the top 10 of the whole of the kingdom. He was a Privy Councillor with all the wealth and the authority that went with him. And he walked to London because someone gave him a horse and he gave it away to somebody else. Well, there were tempestuous times between Hugh and the king, but they seemed to get on well with each other. But in the end, it was the king himself who died. And there was a great big sadness. And then the new king, God save the king. The king is dead. God save the king. And his name was Richard the Lionheart. And at his throne, and then when they put the crown on top of his head, they were having a great big meal, and the King Richard was to stand up, and he turned round. He said, "We'll start the meal." He said, "There's a gap." He said, "Who was supposed to be sitting there?" And they said, "That's Hugh of Lincoln, the Bishop of Lincoln." He said, "Well, where is he?" He said, "Well, I don't know." "Well, go and find him." So they found him. And he was late for the meal. And the King Richard, he said, "Why were you late for my meal? This is the day I've been enthroned. This is the day I'm the new king. I'm the most important person in the land, and you can't be bothered to come to my meal." And Hugh said there was a pauper. They found him behind a hedge in between here and the church at Westminster. And no one was going to bury him. Even the poor deserved to be buried by a priest. So I buried him. That's what I was doing. You could have eaten without me. It doesn't matter. And the king looked at Hugh and he said these words: "Was this poor man more important than your king?" "His soul was," said Hugh. And Richard leant under the table and he picked up a great big thing about this big. And he said, "Privy Councillor, my dad hated people being late at meetings, and so do I. And my dad almost left me a note about you. He said, if you do anything right, anything in your kingdom at any time, make him a Privy Councillor. So I'm making you a Privy Councillor." Now, we all know that Richard didn't spend long here. He was off in his crusades and he was doing this. He got caught in the middle of Germany and they had to ransom the kingdom, and King John was knocking around. We all know all that story. I'll save you about 3/4 of that. Anyway, Hugh didn't get on with John. When John became king, John and him didn't get on at all. They argued and they argued, but John tried to sack him 3 times. He did send him to the Tower of London, and Hugh had a wonderful holiday, sat there with some water and some bread. But in the end, it was Hugh who died first. And the people of Lincoln went to John, and John had to do it even though he didn't want to. And they made him a saint, St. Hugh of Lincoln. And on his gravestone up in Lincoln, it says these words, which why I love this story so much, because it said, "St. Hugh of Lincoln, the bishop, the defier of kings." And what a wonderful thing to have put on your gravestone. But it just struck me, with all the times I've been storytelling, that there was something else going on just 60 miles just to the south of where Lincoln is, and there was another sheriff. And there was another bunch of people roaming around the forest. So there was a Friar Tuck that every tuck shop in England's mentioned after, and there's Much the miller's son. And there was David of Doncaster, and there was Will Sutley, and there was Alan Adale and Will Scarlett. And there was a beautiful, beautiful maid that came from the very county of Nottingham itself. Marion, her name was, which is the old name for Mary sometimes in our land. And there was the big fellow they called Little John. And there was Robin of the Hood. Robin Hood, the most famous, you've all heard of him. He robbed from the rich and he gave to the poor. But you know something? Even when he was twisting the tail of the sheriff of Nottingham and everybody was chasing him around, there's an old saying in the shires of England. It says, a fox must have many dens and he must have many vaults that he can hide in. And I just wonder, whenever they wrote that gravestone in Lincoln, it's supposed to mean that he defied the second Henry, the father of Richard and John. But I just wonder, when you look back at that story, how sound that sheriff was, the sheriff of Lincolnshire. Completely the opposite to the sheriff of Nottingham. And I just wonder if we've missed a trick here. And it's when Robin Hood just disappeared sometimes and he needed a rest and he needed to hide. He just went off into the fens of Lincolnshire. And there he found a really, really decent sheriff and probably one of the best bishops we've ever had. Right, now where we get to. Are we going to go Baba next? Right, okay, Baba. Yes, it's all right. Ooh. I've been trying to tell Stanley Robinson stories for a while, but I just thought I'd tell an English one this week. So, Heather, I will go back to telling. I will start dragging them out in your memory again. I promise. And Diana, wherever you are. Okay.
Mike, whatever story you tell, there are two guarantees. It's going to be a great story, and it's going to be a great story, and it's going to be a great story.
I'm not that good. I know many people who are better than me, and I'm looking at half a dozen of them.
It's not a competition. I truly enjoy the tellings of the story. And just before I tell my story, I want to say Asante Sana Rafiki Yangu across the pond. Thank you very much, my friends from across the pond. I learned more about geography, politics, accents, traditions in this forum than I think I learned in all my years of formal education. The United States of America, for all of its posturing, and I'm not about to speak ill of my country, but for all of its posturing, it's a very isolated country, and we tend to think that the universe centers around us, and it's not so. I really enjoy the stories, the attitudes, the accents, the information, the traditions that I've learned on this forum.
Well,
so, Asante Sana.
You've got to remember, Baba, that we're from the United Kingdom and British and Irish Isles, is how we say it nowadays. But you have to remember these words, and I know the South Africans here as well, saying the world is split into three. Is what is ours, what was ours, and what should have been ours.
and from my cultural point of view, I understand that. But, okay, so let me get ready with my story. First of all, this story is going to be a little bit different from the story, a lot different from the stories I traditionally tell. The names have been changed not to protect the innocent, but because I'm telling the story. And this is a more of a contemporary story. I know the author well, and I want to share the story with you. Now, this is a story best told during stormy nights and balmy days. This is a story about friendship, greed, treachery, and perhaps revenge. I invite you to listen carefully, for at the end of this tale, you must tell me how you think the story ended, whether it ended it foul or well. Now, this story is about two people. There was a young man named Gene Green with an E, and he was a genius. I mean, he was so brilliant, he could make people see color on a black and white television. Everything he touched, he improved, and he had patents coming out of fill in the blank. He had all these patents. He was rich beyond rich, but he was terrible when it came to finances. And this is where his friend Adonis Bankington comes into the picture. Now, Adonis was a economic mastermind. He was a marketing genius. I mean, this man, he could convince people to buy air. Well, the two of them combined forces. And Gene, with his genius, created And Adonis, with his marketing skills, marketed. And soon, within a matter of years, a few years, what it started out as what we used to call a garage business was an international conglomerate. And I mean, they had more money than their grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren could ever spend in a lifetime. But you know, there's an old saying that the more money one makes, the more money one wants. And Adonis fell victim to this. He was not satisfied being the second tier. He was not satisfied being the power behind the genius. He wanted it all. He wanted it all. And he knew that if Gene never created another thing in his life, that Adonis could live forever and beyond with the money they had already made. So Gene conspired, and he framed, Adonis conspired, and he framed Gene and made it look as if Gene had been taking money from the company's till for his own personal use for years. Embezzlement, I believe, is what they call it. And greasing a few palms with money under the table, he assembled a judge, a jury, and a poor excuse for a lawyer for Gene, and they found him guilty of embezzlement. And they gave him an extreme punishment, at least 12 years in prison. And not the cushy prison that they usually send so-called white-collar criminals to. Now, for all of his genius, Gene was a frail man. He was not in good health to begin with, and being imprisoned, he discovered he did not have long to live. Adonis didn't care. It just meant more and more money for him because he had insurance on Gene, and he had conspired to take control over all of the assets. Well, Adonis had himself a huge mansion built. He had so many servants, his servants had servants to help them take care of Adonis. Adonis had more cars than he could drive. His chauffeur had a chauffeur. He was sitting on top of the world, as they say. Then he got word that Gene did not have long to live. So? But then he got a letter through the post that said, "You have 30 days. Enjoy them." What? 30 days? Enjoy what? But there were no fingerprints, no postal mark. How did this letter even get through the system? Adonis was a little perturbed. And then one day, while sitting down to breakfast, he saw on his plate the words, "You have 25 days. Enjoy them." Someone had gotten into his home and written this? So he interviewed all of his servants and his servants' servants and could find no wrong. He even had them polygraphed. And since he could not find the person who was responsible for this, he fired the whole lot. And in their places, he hired he hired mercenaries. He hired mercenary cooks, mercenary chauffeurs, everybody. And he paid them top dollar to avoid them being swayed by somebody else's money. Now he's feeling more comfortable by now. 20 days. He looked in the refrigerator in his kitchen, and there was a sign. "You have 20 days. Enjoy." He was perturbed. How could anyone get through his personnel? He had the latest, the greatest, the most sensitive surveillance systems, security system installed in his mansion, in his cars, on the grounds. He had paramilitary people patrolling. If so much as a flower he did not approve of popped up, he had it mowed down. And he was feeling rather good. And so one day while flying on his private jet, he was sitting feeling rather comfortable, and he picked up a magazine to read, but the magazine had, "You have 15 days. Enjoy them." How the hockey puck did someone get on his private jet and write on his newspaper that he had, yes, he read a newspaper, that he had 15 days. They turned the jet around. He went back to his mansion of mansions, and he barricaded himself in. No one was allowed in or out without being interviewed by at least 3 different people, and he was feeling a bit paranoid. And he went to his entertainment system, and he decided to watch, we'll say, not Netflix, but it sounded a lot like it. And so the movie that he had pulled up began to scroll. And you know how they do the introduction. And the introduction went, in a time where there was turmoil and people were looking to their left and the right, you have 10 days. Enjoy them. What the hockey puck? Now he's really upset. 5 more days passed by. Not a word. He's beginning to feel better. He decided to call and check in on one of his officers, and he opened his phone. Oh, tell you how old this story is. It was a flip phone. They're coming back, you know. And as he was punching in, a private number rang into his phone. And he refused to answer. But it didn't go to voicemail. And instead of private number, it said, you have 5 days. Enjoy them. It was then that he learned that Gene had escaped from prison. No one knew how. No one knew when. The man was a genius. As far as the warden was concerned, he was still in the cell. The warden said, how? I'm looking at him. I told you the man was a genius. It was a holographic projection. The man made a holograph projection in prison. Now Adonis was getting nervous. So Adonis once again fired the whole lot, hired the creme de la creme of all mercenaries, and even had people taste his food before he ate it, drink his water before he drank it. A message said, tonight is the night. Enjoy your last day. Now, Adonis was really upset now. So he got 12 of his best men, 12 of his best mercenaries that followed him everywhere, and I mean everywhere. They had to wear a gas mask for some of this. Fill in the blank. They followed him everywhere. And a little note popped up on the ceiling. If you survive tonight, I'll let you go. Ha, 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 what, ha. He was furious. Now, as in most mystery stories, it was that day that it decided to thunder and storm. I mean, the thunder was thunderous. Even deaf people could hear it. The lightning was lightning. Even the blind could see it. It was a terrible storm. It bent trees this way and that way and this way and that way. And it was a terrible, frightening sensation. Adonis was really nervous. But he had been up for days trying to figure out how this was happening and what he could do to prevent it. And finally, fatigue was taking him over. So he went up to the panic room that he had installed. And as the thunder was thundering, and the lightning was lightning, I'm not trying that one again. Adonis decided to retire to sleep in the panic room. And as he did, he summoned his guards to come into the panic room with him. And he said, if it's life or death, my life matters. And so he entered the panic room, and behind him, all 13 guards entered with him, and the lights went out. Now, I did warn you that I needed you to listen very carefully, for this is a story of friendship, intrigue, and perhaps treachery. Was revenge served on that night? Was rough justice served on that night? Whether it's yay or nay, I invite you to unmute and tell me which way you think the story ends and why.
They all lived happily ever after.
And why do you think that? Some people, I've given you the hints. There is no wrong answer. Well, yes, there is, but no, there is no wrong answer. Do you think that Gene got his revenge? And if so, what makes you think so?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I think is a serious answer, Baba. What goes round comes round.
That's part of it, yes.
Okay.
Janet, do you have a guess?
Well, I'm just wondering about the ghost. The ghost within and the ghost without. Because if he had 12 guards and 13 went in,
Methinks that you're headed in the right direction. Lady Diana, what do you think?
I don't think it's revenge at the end of the day, but I'm not quite sure how it all pans out. But
Well, like you said, Baba, there's no competition, so don't put people on the spot. So,
Well, good folk.
Well, also, how much air would be in a panic room?
I'm sorry, my thing went out. Say again, Heather.
Like, how much air would be in a panic room? Could 14 people survive that? And as Janet said, there shouldn't be, there was only 12 guards. So, did they all suffocate?
Well, if there was not enough air in the panic room, I'm quite sure they would all panic. But I'll say this. I like to tell this story, and I have a series of stories with kind of like convoluted endings, because I like to see how people reason. And I can tell the story to 14 people, and there'll be 15 different responses. Yeah, figure out the math. But Janet, you hit it. Diana, you hit it. Heather, you're on to it. Mike Aura already knows. But he had 12 guards outside the panic room, and 13 guards entered. And that's all I have to say, except for this. If you have a friend, when you have friends and you're in business together, yes, business is business, but don't let greed overtake you. Because one way or other, karma will come back and take a big chunk out of your aspirations. So, be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for your friends, because perhaps friendship is one of the greatest and most valuable things that you can have in this life. And just beware if 12 turns into 13, especially on a Friday night. And that's all I have to say. Asante, thank you very much for your attention. Asante.
right. John, I'm going to do this one, and then we're going to go to Heather, because there was a man. He was in Sydney in Australia, and he walked out of the cricket ground this is where England were playing Australia at cricket, and there were 30,000 people there, and he turned round and he saw Death, and Death went at him, and he said, "Death's pointing at me." He said, "It's not my time to go." And Death looked at him, and he looked at Death, and he said, "He'll not catch me." And he went to the airport, and he got on an airplane, and he flew right away to the UK, the other side of the world. He got on his car, and he drove right away across England to a place called the Malverns. And at the parked the car at the bottom of the hill, and 24 hours later, he walked up to the side of the Malverns, and he walked into the cave, and he sat down there, and he said, "Death will never find me here." And Death said, "I saw you 24 hours ago in Sydney. I wondered how you were going to get here so quickly."
I love the version of the story. Yay! Mike, you never ceased. You never
Your
ceased
time
to amaze
is
me.
here. Your time is here. Anyways, I'm being selfish tonight. That's two I've told. I normally get away without telling any. I'm going to go to Heather next. I'll mute myself. Then we're going to Janet, and then we're going to see what happens after that. Okay? So Heather, a last from the Highlands.
That was great, Mike. I just enjoyed that joke. This is a wee story from the southwest of Scotland, and there was a long time ago. There was this lad called Tam Campbell, and he was actually from the Highlands, but somehow or other, through various work and whatnot, and he just had a bit of, he liked to wander about and do different things and meet different people. And somehow or other, he ended up down in the southwest of Scotland, down along the coast. There's a wee village called Girvan that I don't know if any of you have ever heard of, but it was just south of there that he ended up settling down because he met a lassie and they got married, and things were good actually. They had a wee cottage there on the shore, and they looked across. Now, some of you here know the lovely young storyteller Elsa Dixon, and she's named for her name. Elsa comes from Ailsa Craig, which is an island out there that you can see from the coast of Scotland. And so the cottage looked out, a beautiful view across to Ailsa Craig and across the sea, and it was grand. And he got a job at for the blacksmith. So he worked every day at the smithy, and he came home to a lovely wife. But the problem was that Tam, he took a long, long time to get used to the idea that he was married. He was a bit of a wild character. He liked to go with his pals to the pub. He liked to gamble. He liked to do things when he wanted to. And his poor wife put up with it. I mean, she loved him, and she was a patient woman. But by the time she had her third child in her arms, and Tam was still being, going off whenever he liked and coming home late, she said to him, "Right, Tam, I've had it. I've had enough of this. I'm going to go to my mother's. I'm taking the bairns and I'm away. You need to sort yourself out. You need to work out how to be a good husband and a good father and a responsible man. I've just had it. I'm out of here." And away she went. Well, Tam thought, "Oh, nah, she'll be back in a couple of days." But she wasn't. And at first he didn't mind because, you could do things even more so at any time he liked. But as the days and the weeks passed, and he'd come home from work and there was no fire, there was no dinner. His clothes weren't being mended or washed. The place was a wreck. It was an absolute mess. And he started realising that he missed his wife. He missed her a lot. And he missed his bairns. So he started to clean up the house. He did all those odd jobs, all the things that she'd been nagging him to do for years. He sorted the doors that were slightly wonky, sorted this and that and the next thing. And he started working on the garden as well. And he was quite enjoying doing all this work because it was looking good. The cottage was looking fantastic. He'd put a whitewash on the walls, and he'd put a new roof. He'd thatched the roof, and he'd done a great job. And the place was looking good. And he thought, she'll hear about this soon enough and she'll be back and I'll be glad for it. But the thing about Tam, sometimes, your past deeds come back to haunt you. And one of the things is that many years before, he had gotten into a bit of a bother with the devil. He had a competition with the devil, and he had actually won the competition. Because you see, Tam was a master piper, and he had this competition with the devil, playing tunes, and he had beaten the devil. And the devil had never forgiven him. And the devil had wanted his vengeance. He wanted to take revenge on Tam, but he just was biding his time. And now he started noticing that Tam wasn't going to the pub and drinking. He wasn't gambling. He wasn't doing all these things. That he was behaving himself. He was doing good things. Hey, the devil thought, this is terrible. Can't I be having this? you know, before you know it, I'll be going to the kirk every Sunday. No, I've got to do something about this. And he got an idea how he could take his revenge at the same time. So one day, when Tam came home from work, he was tired, walking home, thinking about what he was going to have for his dinner. And he came round the bend towards his cottage, and he got a shock. Because half of the thatch had been torn off the roof. And he rushed towards the house thinking, what's happened? And when he went in the door, oh my goodness, the place was a complete wreck. It was like a tornado had been through it. There was things everywhere. And then he heard this sort of wee giggling sound. He looked over, and there on the mantelpiece was sitting a wee devil. Wee horns sticking up, wee tail swishing, wee cleft hooves kind of battering the fireplace, and the wee devil was just grinning away and laughing at Tam's face, the shock in Tam's face. Well, Tam knew at once who was behind this. It was obvious. He knew who was behind this. But he didn't know what to do. I mean, he was so shocked that he was too shocked and tired to even get angry. He just felt exhausted at the sight of this chaos. Well, he went out to the garden to see if there was anything to eat, because all the food in the house was on the floor and covered in ashes from the fire. And he looked in the garden, but the only thing that was ready were some turnips. So he houked out the neeps and he washed them. He was too tired to even cook them. He just sat there and ate them raw. And he went to his bed. Well, that was his life from then on. If he tried to tidy up, that wee devil would just pull everything apart again. And every single day there was more mischief, new mischief, old mischief. Just that devil just spent every single moment trying to make Tam's life miserable. And in fact, it got to a point, you know, this went on day after day, that the wee devil sometimes would help Tam clean up a wee bit before he would tear everything apart again. And, you know, just this was the same repeated day after day after day. There was one day that Tam was sitting by the fire and, you know, he was trying to read a book. He was trying to just get a wee bit of peace to himself. And then this hand came over, grabbed the book and started to tear the sheets and throwing them up into the air. And Tam just sighed and he said, oh my goodness, you're good at this. You are driving me insane. You are fantastic at this. I am, aren't I? Said the wee devil. I'm really good at this, aren't I? Yes, you are. So let me just ask, are you meant to just do this for the rest of my life? Is that your job from now on? Yes, that's right, said the wee devil. Oh, said Tam, well, oh gosh, right. Oh, you poor thing. Because I'm still quite a young man. That means you can be doing this for a long time yet. Do you not think that's going to get kind of boring? Wee devil looked a bit surprised. He said, I suppose so. But that's what I have to do. I don't know what else I can do. That's what the devil told me to do. I have to. Oh, said Tom, yeah, well, is there any way out of it? No, said the wee devil. Only if you gave me a task that was impossible to do. But you can't do that. I can do anything and I can do everything. Aye, said Tam, I'm sure you can. You're a clever wee thing. Aye. Aye, but do you want to make a game of it? Would you like to just to have something to do? Aye, said the wee devil. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. What would you like me to do? Tam sat there thinking for a bit. He said, well, one of the things is you've broken all my wife's glass ornaments that she used to have on the mantle there. And the place is looking a bit, bare of things because everything's gotten broken and thrown out. Any chance that you could find something to decorate the place? Something that wouldn't be so breakable? Well, that devil, out the door. Well, Tam went over to the window and watched as that devil went down to the shore and started frantically digging. There was sand just going in all directions. And Tam was thinking, well, maybe I'll manage to get a cup of tea or something while he's away. But within seconds, the devil was back in, and his arms were full with most amazing things. There was gold plates, there was silver vases, there were beautiful ebony boxes inlaid with gems and ivory, and it was incredible treasures. Buried treasures that had long been forgotten. Will this do? Said the devil. Aye, said Tam. Oh, yes, see, you're a clever wee devil, aren't you? That's magic. Do you have another job for me? Well, said Tam, I've always kind of fancied a wee boat of my own, something, maybe painted blue, clinker built. He hadn't gotten any further. That wee devil was out the door. This time it took a wee bit longer, so Tam did get his cup of tea, and he stood there drinking it, watching out the window as just before his eyes, like magic, this boat was appearing. The most beautiful boat, just the boat that Tam had been dreaming about for years, just sitting there on the shore. I thought, that's grand. The devil came back in. There, see, I can do anything. I said, Tam, yeah, it's obvious. You can do anything. There's no point in continuing this game. Oh, said the devil. Really disappointed at that. Are you sure? Is there not anything else you think that I might not be able to do? Well, said Tam, nah, it's obvious you can do anything that I asked you'd be able to do. But, well, there is one thing. But, no. Oh, please, said the devil, anything. Well, I was thinking that it'd be quite handy to have a rope of sand that I could use to bring the boat out of the water up past the high tide mark. A rope of sand, said the devil. Yes, yeah. Long enough to bring it above the high tide mark. Yes, that would be perfect, said Tam. Oh, the devil was gone. Tam smiled. He looked out the window. And he watched as that devil was down there at the shore, making a rope of sand. And you know something? That devil is still there. If you go to Girvan and you go walking along the shore, you might just hear him or see him still working on that rope.
Oh, Heather, that was a lovely story. Well told. Thank you very much. That's a proper Scottish story. Proper Scottish story. Well done. Right, we're going to go to Janet. Now, I've got two people who are sat in front of me. One is Susan from South Africa. If you're going to tell a story or not tell a story, are you missing tonight, or are you going to do one? You're missing tonight. I can see you. Yeah, okay. And I have a Claire Nolan who I've got a picture of, so she's listening, but she's not on the video, and I'm not sure if we've met before, but if you want to tell a story, now's the time for you to tell me if you want to tell a story or not. Message me or something or whatever. Oh, there you go. I can see.
Hello.
You now.
I've listened a few times. As you can see, I'm riding my bicycle, so yes. I've been enjoying listening to all the stories. It's a marvelous afternoon here in upstate New York, and listening to these stories has just added to my delight. Thank you.
That's beautiful. You're always welcome to come, but it's rude not to ask you. That's all. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Maybe another time.
Absolutely. I'm here once a fortnight, but I won't be here in 2 weeks' time because I'm going to do something else. I'll be here in a month's time. I'll get to that in a moment. Janet, over to
Hi.
you.
Hello, everyone. I love that, Heather. I think that was terrific. I sometimes think the little devil comes and throws things around in my house, but I like your devil. He said, please. Right. I was thinking that mostly, apart from a devil and a boggart and your little Lincoln imp, all the stories have been about people, human beings. So I thought, well, I mean, a little bit different, and we'll have a story with animals in it. And it's probably one that many of you will have heard a version. And this is a version, I understand it comes from the border between China and Vietnam. And it's a story about a crow and a peacock. One of those stories which, okay, there may be a moral, you can find it for yourself, or it may be one of those origin stories. I think you can make up your own mind. But there was a time when Crow was sweet of voice and pure white in colour. The strong flight feathers looked as if they were made of little thin slivers of opaque marble. And the soft, downy feathers on his breast were as pearly white and as light as fairy thistledown. Only his small eye was black as the jade sewn into the king's robes. And if you were looking for Crow, you would find him roosting or perhaps roistering in the king of Annam's garden. Roistering he might be with his companion, the peacock. Now the peacock was also pale in colour. He was a very pale yellow all over. Even his great fan tail was pale, the kind of wheaten colour that you sometimes get on the top of the cream. And the two birds were delighted one day to receive an invitation to a wedding. It was the wedding of King Lord Tiger. Yes, Tiger, he of the fine fur coat of burnished gold with subtle dashes of creamy white and great bold bands of imperial black. The birds were a little concerned. Surely they might seem insignificant in such company. How could they decorate themselves so that they would be dramatic and illustrious? In the king's garden, the workmen had been building a summer house and were just finishing it. They're putting the last touches to the carved dragon. The large dragon and the small dragons, blue and green and gold for health and tranquility, red paint for good luck, yellow for wealth and wisdom, and black, just a touch of black for power. Peacock and Crow plotted, planned, and they waited. They waited until the sun rose in the sky and the workmen grew hot and tired. And they began to snooze. And when Peacock and Crow were quite sure that the workmen were fast asleep, stealthily they crept in, barely a flutter of their wings, and they stole the pots of paint. They took them and they hid them in the reeds by the river. And there they began to paint their feathers. Well, Peacock, being the larger of the two, he insisted that he be painted first. And Crow agreed. And he took that beautiful iridescent blue-green and he stroked that colour over the breast of the peacock. When he'd finished, he stood back. He was impressed. And he took more paint, the same colour, and others, and over Peacock's wings and over his great fan tail, he painted intricate patterns. And when he finished, Peacock spread out his feathers in the sun to dry. Then he wandered down to the river to look with enormous admiration at the magnificent design. And as he stood, he heard Crow calling. And Crow in his sweet voice called, "Come, come, Peacock, come paint me." But Peacock was proud of his colours and jealous. And he did not want to share them. He didn't want to share them with Crow. He didn't want to share them with anyone. And so he called out, "Crow, look up. Eagle, the enemy eagle is flying overhead. Hide, hide, hide." And he made to run. And as he made to run, he kicked over the pots of paint. And the paint spilled out and slopped down into the river. Then he heard Crow calling, "Peacock, Peacock, look, the sky is clear. The eagle has gone. Come, paint me now." Peacock arrived to where Crow was hiding, holding one single pot of paint. And he began to paint Crow's breast, just as Crow had painted his. And when he'd finished, he stood back and he looked. And then he moved to the back of Crow. He started to paint. Now Crow was surprised that Peacock was using still the same pot of paint. But Peacock said, "Oh, you will look stunning." And Crow waited, and he stood there, quite unaware that Peacock was painting him as black as pitch, as black as coal, as black as jet, as black as the jade of his eye. When Peacock had finished, Crow spread out his wings, and he went down to the river to admire his new colours. But when he saw his dark reflection, he let out a scream of anger. But the scream was so harsh, it stuck in his throat like a rough burr and is still there today. And that is why Crow today is black and only has that hoarse cry. But what of Peacock? Well, Peacock kept his fine, fancy feathers. But, that ear-splitting yell that the peacock gives, whenever I hear it, I sometimes wonder, is he rehearsing his cry of terror? Because he never knows. He never knows when Crow might return to take his revenge. For after all, it was he, Peacock, who painted Crow black, the dragon colour of power. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Janet. That's a lovely story. And we have dragons here on the Welsh borders. We have red ones from Wales, and we have green ones from England, and white, the Celtic ones and things. It's lovely to hear dragon stories. Right, so I've been through everybody. There is one left, and it's Lucy. And I know you're listening, Lucy, and I know you don't normally tell stories, but I haven't asked you, so it's only polite so to do. So,
well, that's very kind, but thank you. But I'm not a storyteller, or at least not good enough to be in this forum. But thank you. I've really enjoyed listening to everybody. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Well, you've got to remember, Lucy, if God had wanted us all to tell stories, he'd have given us two tongues and one ear. Right, so I think I've been everywhere, and it's lovely to be here again. In 2 weeks' time, I myself can't come here, so John and the World Storytelling Cafe are going to get a replacement.
We will organise someone else, Mike. There is
none of our team. None of our team can do it because we're doing a day of stories and poetry, and we've got 30 autistic kids coming to a forest school. Lucy, if you're not doing anything, come up to Shropshire for the day. It's a Sunday the 12th. We've got 30 autistic children coming to a forest school, and we're going to take them into the woods, and we're going to do it, and we're going to go and build dens and do poetry and storytelling and all sorts of stuff.
Well, that's a lovely invitation, but I'm going to be in the Lake District at my niece's hen party.
No, you can't go boozing. This is far more important. You can't.
No, they're all teetotal vegans.
My goodness.
Well, look, we're the storytellers. You're not going to get away with lies like that.
It's true. It's true. It's a true tale.
Yeah.
So
Mike,
we will have someone.
Right, Heather, I want you to say if there's anywhere in Scotland, is anything called a vegan gin?
Vegan.
Vegan gin. No, never heard of vegan gin. No, never heard. We don't believe it exists, Lucy Anderson would.
Yeah,
I think gin is vegan by definition, isn't it?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, did you say autistic? Your audience is going to be autistic?
Autistic, yeah. We have a group of
that is
what we're
great.
trying to do over here. Yeah,
Storytelling.
What we're trying to do over here. Go on.
I want to applaud you on that, because that audience really appreciates storytelling. One of my friends told me that I performed a story. She was not sure her son would be able to follow. Not only did he follow, he participated. That was he was 10 years old. He's now 18, and he still talks about being in the story. So I think you're going to have a great impact, and I'm applauding you ahead of time.
Well, it's thank you very much, but it's something what the festival does. We have dyslexic groups and Parkinson, youth age, and all sorts of people who sometimes have been on the fringes of education for whatever reason they are.
Yeah.
And, so that's what we're doing next Sunday.
You're being modest, but I applaud you ahead of time.
Yeah, if you happen to be close, Heather, if you want to pop down, it's only about 300 or 400 miles, you'll be fine. You know? Diana's the same. Anyways, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be someone else, so I'll be back here in a month's time, all being well. And it's lovely to be in your company again. We've heard some wonderful stories tonight, and they've been certainly well told. And I'm going away. It's not very often I can say this, but Heather Yule, you've done it again. A Rope of Sand. That's a lovely story, and I don't think I've heard it before. And thank you very much.
It's been fantastic, Mike Rust. Thank you incredibly. We'll see you in a month. Have a wonderful time. Ali, thank you for driving the bus.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
John, do you want to mention about Hala next week? Hala Muntha.
That's what I'm getting to.
Oh, sorry.
Get to my princess.
Sorry.
My goodness gracious me. Right. And coming up on Tuesday, we have our young tellers, 18 years and under, and that's always a brilliant night. Susan usually comes along as audience, and thank you, Susan, for that. And Friday, we've got Baden Prince doing stories for children. Saturday, and this isn't on the schedule yet, but we're going to create something special. It's always open mic, this sort of thing, but it'll be 8 o'clock in the evening. Ali, I apologize for keeping you up late that night. And but that will be in conjunction with Sparkleverse. That'll be a special for Sparkleverse, which is this online version of Burning Man. That I think they're able to listen to all this we've still got to work out the tech a bit. But Sunday, a really special one, which Lucy has preempted, but it's worth it actually, because it's Lucy's been working very hard on this. And Hala, who is one of our young tellers from Gaza Strip, has sent a film over. She's of Palestinian cooking and a family story, and Hala's sort of almost an ambassador, because she wants to show there is more to Palestine than what we read in the papers. There's a whole culture there. And she's said she's made a film. And Lucy, am I right? You're going to introduce it?
Yes, I'll introduce her. And I think before she presents her video, she's going to tell a little story and also give a little bit of information about where she lives and her country, and what it's like to live there, and her friends and family. So she's a delightful young person. She's only 15 years old.
Right, can we send chocolate to her, because we live next door?
It's almost impossible, Mike.
Almost is a word I don't believe in.
No,
Lucy,
hold on.
how do we start working on this?
What time? What time is that?
We want.
Yeah, let me finish announcing the thing. We're not said what time it's on. It's
Okay.
6 o'clock UK time, same time as this, so 6 o'clock UK time. It's a bit all over the place next week, so it's 5 o'clock for the young tellers, 6 o'clock for Baden, 8 o'clock for the Sparkle Burst special, and 6 o'clock for Hala.
Right.
So,
okay, Lucy, can we send chocolate to the Gaza Strip?
I have no idea. I've never sent anything to the Gaza Strip.
Well, let's get
I
working
will.
on it.
Shall I ask Hala, or do you want it to be a surprise?
No, we need to talk and get. I'll email you tomorrow. We'll start working on this. We live next door to a chocolate factory. Kids turn up and start telling stories. We send them chocolate. We've sent some to India. We've sent some to Nigeria. I'm sure we can find a way of sending some to Nigeria.
Fantastic.
it's been really appreciated, Mike. Thank you. There are big smiles when they arrive, and they put pictures of the chocolate up on Facebook.
I still remember when I was a child of about 6 years old, being given by my nursery school teacher a little tin of toffees that had a picture of a cute little puppy dog on it, and that stayed with me for 50 years.
Absolutely. And someone gave me a certificate to how to be a storyteller last year, and I framed it and stuck it in my office. These things are important, and we live next door. And you Americans and Scottish people and South Africans, Bourneville is where they make Cadbury's chocolate, and it's the best chocolate in the world, and we don't mind posting it all over the world.
When I was a child, they had something called Katydids. They had something called Katydids,
absolutely.
and you can only order them, or people went door to door selling them. They came in tins, and you had that funny looking little key where you had to go around the rim to get it loose, and it was chocolate and I think nuts. It was delicious, but then I don't know, they disappeared. I don't even think you get them online anymore. But they were some of the best candies.
I'll tell you what, Baba, and there's a pint and a half of dairy milk in every bar of chocolate. Everybody's laughing. We know all of it. We know the important stuff in the world. Don't you worry about it. And all the cows live where I live. Okay. Right, Ali. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, my friends. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
To be continued until the next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.